Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh,
let the king of my heart be the witness of my sins, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good.
you're never gonna let me down. 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 No.
You're never gonna let me down.
You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. You are good.
inside your shoe.
Hey, what are we doing here?
I don't know.
No idea.
They didn't tell me.
They didn't tell me either.
Good morning, guys. You can come right over here.
Where are we going?
I don't think we signed up for this.
You're all awake?
Yes.
We are.
Good. We're gonna have fun today.
Hi.
Hi. If you can stand right behind that line. I want to welcome you all to Etowah River Park. It's such a beautiful hidden gem in Canton. You may be wondering to yourself, but why am I here?
So why are we here?
Today you are going to be running a mile.
No, we're not.
Hey,
We'll hold all questions to the end. Each of you were specifically chosen for this task, and all of you have something very unique about you, and that is your shoes. You may be thinking to yourself, did I wear the right shoes to run a race in?
big no.
Yeah.
Here's how we're gonna make this fair for you, okay? Remove your shoes and place them in front of you. So go ahead, you can do that right now. You can leave your socks
That got
on.
weird real quick.
Kid, you want me to help?
You don't have socks on those big old
No,
shoes.
I can't. I can't fit my feet in them.
Your toenails are kind of long.
Yeah, didn't know this was happening.
Great. And now I want each of you to take one big step to your right with the person on the end going to the beginning.
Oh, right on.
Oh man. I got
I'm
where
in the
you're
wedges.
I got so lucky. This is gonna be great.
I can get both of my
God.
feet in one of your
Guys,
shoes.
you don't know what's gonna happen.
Big guy in the little
I'm just
shoes.
assuming.
You don't know what's gonna happen.
Can I have your shoes? Oh,
Please.
Say hello and get acquainted with your new shoes. And let's go ahead and put those bad boys on. We've got a race to run. I've got plenty of tools to help you get them on.
oh, nice.
Gap tape,
Oh, don't tape my shoes. They're gonna stay good.
zip ties.
Socks? You got
She'll
some
have a
socks?
request for socks. No socks.
Oh my God, I do not like feet.
Well, today you're gonna like them. You want me to tape you
Ken,
in?
that's perfect.
This is what you're doing good.
You want me to help you?
Yeah, okay. Garrett, those are perfect.
I don't hate this.
Now, can we not put your toe in at least?
No, it's gonna
It's not
break.
gonna work. You want me to tape you down too?
They won't go in, so we're good. No.
You're good? You feel good?
I
Okay.
don't appreciate any of this.
So, runners, are you ready?
No, we're not ready.
Is this the finish
are
line?
ready.
Are we really running?
This is the start line and the finish line. All right, guys, let's get ready. On your mark, get set, go. You taped on shoes. You got
It's pretty funny, huh? Hey, so over the next 2 weeks, this is a 3-week conversation. Next week, you'll get to see more about the race, and then we'll conclude the finish of the race in week 3. So even if you're just watching online, you can at least catch up with the big guy in the little shoes, if nothing else. It'll be worth that. So, hey, so welcome to this 3-week conversation. If we've never met before, my name is Gavin, and we love this opportunity to have a local series, and we're going to talk about what it's kind of like to run a mile in someone else's shoes, in your shoes. And, you know, the reality is that we live life in our shoes through our perspective, but when we begin to see something from someone else's perspective, it kind of changes everything. So to kind of get the conversation started today, we're going to focus on one person for pretty much the whole time, a guy named Jesus. Probably you've all heard of him. If you haven't, well, he's Jesus. He's a pretty good guy. In fact, he is the most likable guy ever. Jesus is so easy to like and so easy to love. I mean, he is just so likable. He's so lovable. In fact, even if you're not a Jesus follower and you don't like church and you don't like Christians, thanks for being here, by the way, you probably are okay with Jesus. His followers sometimes are terrible, but he's pretty great. He's so likable. He's so lovable. In fact, did you know that other even world religions like and love Jesus? In Islam, for instance, Jesus is considered to be one of the highest and greatest prophets to have ever lived. In the Baha'i faith, they look at Jesus as being one of many, but one of a manifestation of God. So, I mean, he's kind of a big deal in the world of religion. In fact, if we were to line up all the religious leaders of all the different religions, Jesus, he kind of stands out in a way. He's kind of like the Mr. Congeniality of religion. He's just so likable and so lovable. And the reason is because of the way he lived and the way he loved. If you were to open up the pages of the New Testament, the beginnings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and kind of read through the stories of Jesus, you would just see page after page after page of a guy that's so easy to like and so easy to love. I mean, first, you'd come across stories where he's just so helpful. There's this incredible moment where Jesus and his disciples are surrounded by, it says 5,000, but that was probably just the men. There could have been 15 or even 20,000 people there on the side of a hill, and they're all getting hungry. His disciples notice that they're all getting hungry, and so they come to Jesus and they say, hey, we should dismiss the crowd because, these guys, they're all going to be hungry. What are we going to do? And Jesus says, well, I know what we can do. Let's just be helpful. We can feed them all. So the disciples look at each other and they think, this guy is fun, he's crazy, he's fun. We can't feed 20,000 people. You remember the story though? They collect like a little boy's lunchbox and they open it up and inside there's some fish and chips, some bread. And so Jesus prays over it and they feed 20,000 people with this one little kid's lunchbox. So unbelievably helpful. How do you not like that guy? And he's fun. He performed all sorts of miracles. Remember his first miracle? How fun is this? He's at a wedding and he turns water into wine. What a fun miracle to start with, right? Best party ever to invite that guy. In fact, he got invited to all the weddings after that. The guy is so fun. He's so helpful. And maybe more than anything, and maybe more importantly than anything, he's so loving. Like Jesus is so loving. He comes across a guy named Matthew. Matthew's a tax collector. I know we don't really have a connotation for that today, but 2,000 years ago, that's the most hated person in Israel. As a Jewish tax collector, no one liked you. In fact, everyone hated you. Jesus comes across Matthew and he says, hey, I see more in you than a tax collector. Hey, why don't you just come and follow me and be one of my 12 disciples? The rest of the guys were like, no, not that guy. But that's how loving he was. In fact, later, he bumped into a guy named Zacchaeus. He didn't actually bump into him because Zacchaeus was up in a tree, and there was a parade, and Zacchaeus had climbed the tree so he could see better, but also to get away from people because Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. You think people hated Matthew, they really hated Zacchaeus. And Jesus stumbles upon Zacchaeus, and he sees him in a tree, and he says, hey, why don't you come down so we can go have some dinner together and just hang out? I want to get to know you better. He's so loving. He one day was near the temple, and a woman was caught in adultery, and the punishment for that back then, at least for the Jewish community, was to be stoned. And so they bring her along with a bunch of rocks in their hands to Jesus. And Jesus is so loving. Do you remember what he does? He has this beautiful conversation with her, and he convinces everybody in one statement to drop all of their stones. And he challenges her to live differently, but it all began with love. He would bump into people who were lame and heal them. He would bump into blind people, and people around the blind person would say, who sinned, the blind person or his parents, that he's blind? And Jesus would go, none of those things, you're wrong. And he would heal his blindness. So loving. He would even help Roman centurion guards and heal their sicknesses of the children and their spouses. The guy was so loving. So for 3 years, these 12 disciples followed Jesus around and watched and learned all about the love that he kept displaying. No wonder everybody liked and loved Jesus. And then one day they find themselves in what we call the upper room. They were celebrating the Passover feast, very important moment in the life of a Jewish person. Once a year they would celebrate how God had led the nation of Israel out of slavery in Egypt through Moses. You remember the story, let my people go and all that Charlton Heston stuff. And so they let them out. So once a year they had this big feast to celebrate and remember that. And in this feast, Jesus did some really important things. Now, it was about 12 or so hours before he was going to be arrested and the crucifixion would begin. Jesus had kind of informed the disciples, but it was always over their head. They had no idea. So they're sitting in the upper room with Jesus, and Jesus knows what's going to happen early that next morning, but they don't know. So Jesus begins to do some important things to prepare them for what's about to happen. He washes their feet, which was weird. Several of the disciples kind of tried to refuse the foot service thing, and Jesus said, no, I'm going to wash your feet because I need you to understand that true leadership is about serving others. So that was an interesting moment. He took some bread and he broke it, and he said, this is kind of an indication of my body that's about to be broken for you. And then he took the wine and he said that it's an indication of the blood, his blood that was going to be spilled for humanity. In fact, he even said, from now on, this will take the place of the Passover feast, this thing that we call communion, and you'll do it in remembrance of what's going to happen tomorrow, even though you don't really know what's going to happen. And then, towards the end of the feast, Jesus looks at these guys and he says, you know what, I want to give you a new command as well. Now, this was kind of cool because up until this point, as a Jewish person, you've been trying to live out 613 commands. And some would say it had grown to over 2,000 commands. And so these Jewish guys, these 12 guys are sitting with Jesus, and he says, I want to give you a new command. Not an additional one, but a replacement command. And he looks at him, and he says, a new command I give you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And when they heard that, I think they all went, oh, wait a minute. That's like a level up of the old command we've been working off of. In fact, there's like this OG rule we've been working off of, not original gangsters, the original golden rule that we've been living out of. The original golden rule to treat other people the way that you want to be treated. I mean, that goes all the way back to the beginning of Israel. In Leviticus, we find it for the first time. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So up until this moment, good little Jewish boys and girls have been trying to do this. They've been trying to love one another the way that they want to be treated and loved. And Jesus says, yeah, I understand that's what we've been doing, but I'm going to make it even more simple than that. I'm going to replace all the commands with one thing. A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. Not as you want to be loved, but as I have loved you. So I want you to love everyone else. Now, it's hard to imagine, but if you could put yourself in that upper room and maybe put yourself in their shoes or sandals, whatever they were wearing at the time, and think about what it would be like to hear this. It's kind of fascinating, right? Like, I imagine those 12 guys sitting around the table heard this new command from Jesus and thought, yeah, okay. I mean, that kind of makes sense. We've been following Jesus. We've been following you for 3 years. We've watched how likable, how loving you are. We can do that. Like we can treat people the way that you have been treating people. We can love people the way that you have been loving people. I mean, when we bump into lepers, instead of like yelling and running, maybe we can be more loving. Like maybe we can even kind of get near them and have a conversation with them. I mean, we're not going to touch them like you did, but maybe we can be more loving. I mean, if someone's caught in adultery and they bring them to us, instead of throwing stones, maybe we can convince everybody to be more kind and more gracious, more merciful. Maybe we can be more loving too. I mean, when we see the tax collectors, maybe, well, not those guys, but the rest of everybody, like, we can be more like you, Jesus. Like, yeah, we can be more loving. Surely we can do that. Isn't it funny that they had no idea? They had no idea how far-reaching God's love was about to be. They had no idea what it really was going to look like to fulfill that brand new commandment. You see, on the other side of the crucifixion, that new commandment looks really daunting. But before the crucifixion, it just sounds like we should just be nicer. We should just be a little kinder. And the disciples probably thought, yeah, we can do that. I wonder how they felt 12 hours later, 24 hours later. I bet they kind of feel the way that we do, right? Because when we come across this new command, we understand how difficult it really is. In fact, I think we would all say that when it comes to Jesus, loving Jesus is way easier than loving like Jesus. I mean, loving Jesus is easy. He's real lovable. He loves you. He's been pursuing you your whole life, not to pay you back, but to hug you, to win you back. I mean, he's so likable. He's so lovable. So loving Jesus, that's pretty easy. But loving like Jesus, that's really difficult, because loving like Jesus on this side of the crucifixion means that you give your life for people, that you lay your desires down and pick up the desires of others, that you serve others, that you put others first, not sometimes like completely first. That's almost impossible. And you know why it's so difficult to do this well? You know why it's so hard to fulfill that new commandment well? I bet you do. It's because of those people. Those people are the worst, man. Like, it is so hard to love those people. You know who those people are, right? Like, it's that group of people who are just impossible to love. Now for some of you, that may be like an individual person. Maybe, I don't know, maybe your mother-in-law or something. Not my mother-in-law. In case you're watching, you are not one of these people, okay? These people have them, not you. We love you, thank you. So, not mine, but maybe yours, or maybe it's an uncle or an aunt or a cousin, I don't know, a coworker. Oftentimes, though, those people are kind of this category of people, aren't they? Like, let me explain it. Like maybe those people to you, maybe it's those people who still write checks at the grocery store. Who does that, you know? Come on, those people. Maybe those people are the ones who pull up to the four-way stop and have no ability to figure out who got there first. And they just mess everything up for everybody, you know those people? Or those people who drive below the speed limit in the left-hand lane when you are clearly trying to go around them, you know those people? There's a lot of driving-related those people, by the way. If I could needle just a little bit, we all have those people, right? And we often all have categories of those people. Maybe for you, maybe, I don't know, but maybe for you, there's a political version of those people. Like maybe it's that other party. And you know that, I mean, they're just wrong. They're just wrong. They're those people, though, for you. Maybe there's like a racial version of those people for you. Or maybe there's a generational version of those people for you. Or maybe there's a gender version, or maybe a lifestyle version of those people. And you know enough about those people to not like them. And when you think about those people, it just makes you frustrated. And it definitely makes you wonder if living out that new commandment to love one another, if they count in the one another category, I'm not so sure I can love them, right? In fact, for a minute, who are those people for you? Like, don't yell it and don't elbow anybody for sure. But who are those people in your life? Who are those people? See, it's easy to imagine Jesus loving those people, because he's Jesus. He loved everybody. Like, if he had a superpower, it was love. He's like Captain Love. I mean, the guy is unbelievable. Like, we can imagine Jesus loving those people in our life, but us loving those people, it just seems crazy. Here's why. When we come across this new verse, this new commandment, right? A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. When we come across this, honestly, it's easy just to skip over it when it comes to those people. Like, we'll take it seriously in our marriage, or maybe in our dating relationships. Don't do this at the same time, but you get the point, right? Like with our kids, maybe. We take it seriously with coworkers because that's important. There's a direct benefit to us too. But when it comes to those people, living this out, it just seems impossible. It doesn't even seem worth it. But maybe this will help you. Because when you think about the way Jesus lived, and you think about how likable, how lovable he is, it's easy to imagine that everybody was on Jesus' side, so no wonder he could love and like everybody. But did you know that Jesus had those people too? You're not the only one with a those people problem. Jesus had a those people problem. And you know who the those people in his life were? It was the religious elite people. The religious elite were those people for Jesus. I mean, the religious elite were people like the Pharisees or the elders, the chief priests, the Jewish leaders, the religious leaders. And they did not like Jesus. In fact, they were so anti-Jesus, I can't even describe how much they didn't like this guy. And the reason that they didn't like him, because if Jesus was actually the Messiah, it meant they would lose their power, that they would lose their wealth, they would lose their status in the Israelite community as being closest to God, the most important religious people. And they weren't willing to lose that. Even if he was the Messiah, they weren't willing to sacrifice what they had for him. And so they were constantly anti-Jesus. They were always trying to trick him and trap him. They were trying to figure out a way to arrest him, because if they could get rid of him, they could get rid of the movement, and they could be back in power with no one opposing them. In fact, if you're not sure that Jesus had a problem with these people, let me just show you something that he said about them. Matthew, one of the disciples, was there and heard Jesus specifically talking to a group of religious leaders. And here's what he heard. This is what Jesus said. "Woe to you," Jesus says, "teachers of the law and Pharisees." Those are those people in his life. "You hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to be people of righteousness, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." It's like, dang, Jesus, how do you really feel about these people, right? I mean, these are those people in his life. They were so difficult to deal with. They hated Jesus. So Jesus had those people too. But then those people in his life got a little more difficult. I don't know who those people are. I doubt that they're secretly plotting and scheming to arrest you and murder you. I mean, maybe, probably not. But that's what's happening here. In fact, Matthew tells us a little bit more about that. Matthew writes in his gospel, then the chief priests and the elders, some of those people, of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they schemed to arrest and secretly kill Jesus. But they decided not during the festival, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. I mean, all the people were pro-Jesus, but there were those people who weren't. In fact, they were so not for Jesus, they were trying to figure out a way to arrest him and kill him. And they were working really hard to make that happen. Now, you can imagine being in Jesus' shoes, trying to love those people, trying to even like those people. So if we kind of go back to the upper room for a minute, Jesus knows that in a few hours he is going to be arrested by those people. And he's going to be crucified by those people. So he's in the upper room and he's having that Passover feast that we talked about earlier. And at the end of the feast, he takes just a few of the disciples and he goes out into the Garden of Gethsemane. He goes out into this garden and he begins to pray. He prays all evening, all night long until the wee hours of the morning. And here's what he's praying. He's praying, God, if there's any other way, I'd prefer it. If there's any other way for you to create an opportunity for people to have a right standing with you, I'd prefer any other way. But not my will, your will be done. If this is the only way, I will do it. But oh my gosh, if there's another way, please, 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 I'd prefer it. That's what he's praying. Of course, at the end of that evening, as he prays all night, it becomes evident that there is no other way. This is the way. And Jesus, believing and praying, not my will, but your will be done, accepts the fact that that's the only way. And as he's finishing his kind of prayer, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, who had agreed to betray Jesus, shows up. And he shows up with a group of those people in Jesus' life. Here's what Matthew tells us. He said, while he was still speaking, Jesus, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people, more of those people. Then the men stepped forward. They seized Jesus and they arrested him. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law, more of those people are gathered, and the elders had assembled. So the chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin, all of those people are there, and they're all against Jesus. They were looking, here's what they're doing, they're looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they couldn't find any, though. Many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 people came forward and declared, and here's what they kind of said in kind of in front of all of those people and in front of Jesus. They said, this fellow said, speaking of Jesus, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. Then the high priest stood up and he said to Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus, in front of those people, just remained silent. Then the high priest said to Jesus, I charge you under oath by the living God. And he's thinking, yeah, I know who that guy is. I charge you under the oath of the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And for the first time, Jesus speaks. You have said so, Jesus replied. But I say to all of you, and it's hard to understand how massive this statement was. Jesus looks at those people. And he says, from now on, you will see the Son of Man, that's another word for Messiah, talking about himself, sitting at the right hand of the mighty one God and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and he said, he has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think we should do, those people? What do you think we should do to him? And Jesus' version of those people turned, and they all said, he's worthy of death, they answered. So then they spit in his face, and they struck him with their fist. Others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, Messiah, who hit you? From this moment, it got even worse. Because when you were convicted to the cross, it began with a beating. So they took Jesus out and beat him. In fact, a lot of people never even made it to the cross because the beating, the flogging was so severe, people would die during that. But Jesus survives it. And they lead him to this place called Golgotha. And they lay him down on a big piece of wood. And they take these big giant stakes and they drive them through his wrists, right through the nerves in his wrists. And then the same thing through his ankles. And they lift him up on a cross. And beside him on his right and his left are two other criminals, hanging as well. And above his head there's a little sign, all in lowercase, that said, Jesus, King of the Jews. And he hung there for you and for me, for all of humanity. In fact, the reason that Jesus had to hang on the cross is because when someone sins, something always dies. We know that's true in our life. We've sinned before and killed relationships. When someone sins, something dies. And Jesus has lived a perfect, sinless life for this moment so that he could be the final sacrifice for the sin of humanity, for the sin of me, for you. So as he's hanging there as this perfect sacrifice, the final sacrifice, he doesn't say very much, but there are a few things that he does say, kind of like a prayer in a way. At one point, he looks at this crowd that is gathered, most, by the way, who were mocking him and spitting on him, and he looks at him and he says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. That's pretty powerful. But then there's this other thing he says, and it's a very interesting, kind of weird thing, but it might be the most powerful thing. And in this moment, what Jesus says punctuates what he meant by that new command and gives us something to really consider if we are going to try to live out that new command that he gave us. Matthew says it this way, from noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all of the land. And about 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, and here it is. He said it in Hebrew, but here's the translation. My God, why have you forsaken me? This is such an interesting moment. See, when Jesus was on the cross, he was there to take on the weight of sin. But sin separates people from God. Up until this point, Jesus has been in perfect communion, perfect harmony with his heavenly Father, with God, because he was sinless. He has never been separated. But in this one moment, in this one very moment, as the sin of humanity piled onto the shoulders of Jesus, for the very first time in his life, he felt what it was like to be separated from God. And in that emotion, he cries out to God, why have you forsaken me? And God hadn't forsaken Jesus, but it felt that way because he felt separated for the very first time. You have felt that, haven't you? Like you have felt separated from God, and you've probably even cried out, maybe, God, where are you? Why have you left me? And God's like, I haven't left you. It's just the sin in your life. It's separating you from me. For the very first time, Jesus felt separated. He felt apart, and it killed him. Do you know why Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane was praying so fervently to have any other path than the cross? Do you know why? It wasn't because of the beatings, and it wasn't because of the pain, even though it's unbearable, something we will never see or experience. The reason Jesus was praying for a different way was because he didn't want this moment to happen. He didn't want to feel separated from God. But this is a really powerful moment because for the very first time, Jesus felt the full pain of being fully you. Listen, for the very first time in 33 or so years, Jesus felt what it actually looks like to be you. He literally walked in your shoes in this moment and felt the pain of separation and felt the pain of being apart from God. And he was praying to avoid it, but he also knew it was the only way for you to have a relationship with your Heavenly Father. I mean, on that cross, he fully understood what it felt like to be you. And you know what that really displays? It displays this beautiful yet incredibly difficult thing. It displays empathy. It displays empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share in the feelings of someone else. Empathy is this beautiful thing that love drives us to lean into. See, sympathy and empathy are different, right? Sympathy is kind of feeling for somebody, but empathy is feeling with somebody. You can think of it this way, like if you were to maybe walk down a road and maybe there's a well and someone has fallen down into the well and you lean over, sympathy would say, hey, how can I help? Here's a rope, here's a sandwich. I don't know, right? That's sympathy. Empathy is different. Empathy would say, let me climb down in the well with you. Let me sit with you. Let me experience what it's like down there with you. That's empathy. And that's what Jesus put on full display as he hung on that cross. In fact, Jesus' love for you was so great that it drove him to experience what it was like to be you and die for you. And that has a direct correlation to this brand new commandment that Jesus has given all of us. See, if you really think about it, loving one another really does create a hunger to understand one another. If you really want to take this commandment seriously, right, to love one another as Jesus has loved you, well, Jesus decided to feel everything you're feeling, to understand what it's like to be you, to share in that emotion on the cross. And when it comes to us pursuing that new commandment, it really does come down to leading with empathy, to understanding what it's like to not be you, to understanding what it's like to live in someone else's shoes, to see things the way that they see things. And this beautiful thing happens when we lean into this, because loving one another creates a hunger to understand one another, which, by the way, allows us to better love one another too. Because the more you're able to understand someone, the better you're able to love them. And the more that you lean into empathy, the more you're able to understand and kind of share in those feelings. It's exactly what Jesus did for you. And it's really exactly what the new command is asking of you, to love one another, even those people. Even those people. In fact, if we could kind of go back to that question for a minute, who are the those people in your life? Who are your those people? And when you think about that group or that category or that person, what does it look like for you to actually love them the way that Jesus has loved you? It feels daunting. It feels difficult. But it's also possible. And empathy is what creates the path for that possibility. So when it comes to those people, like how can you better understand them? How can you better understand their perspective? How can you better understand why they think the way they think, why they act the way they act, why they believe the way they believe? How can you better understand why they vote the way they vote? How can you better understand their worldview, their perspective? How can you learn more about their story? How can you learn more about where they're coming from? That's what empathy creates a hunger to do. But on the heels of that, it also allows you to share in their feelings. When you think about those people, how can you begin to share their feelings, not dismiss their feelings, but share in their feelings? And even if you don't feel the same way, and even if you don't think what they're feeling is true, if it's true to them, it's a valid feeling. How can you begin to share in their feelings? Here's what I will promise you will happen. If you can lean into empathy with those people, it might not change those people. It will absolutely change you. And it will give you a brand new ability to love one another as Jesus has loved you. And if you're a Jesus follower, that's the only command that we're actually supposed to be trying to figure out and live out in our life. So, how can you better understand those people? And how can you share in the feelings of those people? That is worth trying to figure out if we want to take that new commandment seriously. Now next week, we're going to come back and pick up this conversation, and we're going to talk about how do we do that in the context of difficult relationships, and then we're going to come back in week 3 and make it really, really, really practical. But this is a little bit of an introduction, but it's a pretty important one because empathy really does matter. Before we leave, can we take a second and pray together? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your Son. Thank you for this amazing, amazing empathy that he put on display and really and literally sharing in our feelings and understanding how it feels to be us, which is so powerful, God, because when we think about Jesus and his love for us, it's not a distant kind of love. He knows exactly what it's like to be us, which is why he died for us. So God, I pray out of that same emotion that maybe our love for others will cause us to want to understand them more, to share in their feelings more. And while that may not change them, we know it'll change us, because it'll change our heart as we begin to see things from other people's shoes. God, thank you for that opportunity, as difficult as it may be, and what it really holds for us on the other side. God, we love you, and Jesus, we pray this in your name. Amen.
When you speak, confusion fades. Just a word, and suddenly you're not afraid, 'cause you speak and freedom reigns. There is hope in every single word you say. I don't wanna miss one word you speak, 'cause everything you say is life to me.